Hi, and welcome to MiWeek. We are so glad that you're with us. I'm Christy McDonald. Two interesting moves this week that could change future leadership in the city of Detroit. We'll get to that coming up. But we begin tonight with the state of education in Michigan. If you had a conversation about schools this week, chances are you heard or you used the words skunk works, the name of the so-called secret group working on a low-cost school model using technology and funding it with a voucher-like plan. Well, the outcry over skunk works continued during the governor's education summit, where he distanced himself from the group, but stressed that he always encourages people to bring him ideas. Finally, late this week, the state superintendent announced he would be part of the group, really taking the whole secret thing out of it. But it leads to the bigger conversation of where are we with our public school system and Michigan's performance, and do we need some radical ideas? This is where we start tonight, and joining me now are contributors Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's always so good to see you.
Good to be here.
Always good to be here on a Friday.
On a Friday. All right, so let's jump right into this. We talked about skunk works a little bit last week when the story came out in the Detroit News. So which was worse for people? The fact that it was talking about using a voucher-like system, or the fact that these conversations were done in so-called secret?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit disingenuous to jump all over the secret aspect of it. This is how policy's always done. Somewhere, the ideas start being talked about outside the public eye amongst a small group of people, whether it's in the union offices as it was done under Granholm, or whether you pull together 4 or 5 people as Snyder did here and start talking about big ideas that eventually become policy. To call this a voucher-like system is a stretch. There's no proposal here to give public money to private schools. This is more of a school choice model than it is a voucher model, and you need big ideas in education. And this notion that it's all about how much you spend rather than how well you spend, if Snyder can break that mindset, it will be a big leap forward for education in Michigan.
Did you have a big problem with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think my problem with it is that we suspected that a bill would emerge from it, right? That this would be the only debate that was really going to take place, and we've seen that before with this legislature, right? Right to work, some of the other things that they've done, they ram stuff through at the last minute, and there's no legitimate discussion that goes on about the issue. I don't have that much of a problem with some of the things they're talking about here. I think they're ideas that should be on the table, that we should be discussing. I think the idea of really radically departing from the way that we fund public schools in Michigan makes a lot of sense. I just think there's nothing wrong with doing this out in the open. There's nothing controversial.
And it would have eventually become in the open, Steve, but all policy starts with brainstorming sessions.
And that's fine.
Small groups.
But the other problem was who was around this table, right? Was there a teacher around the table? Was there a representative from the unions who play an important role in education? If you really wanted to change things in a way that was going to help out schools in the state, I think you had to be a lot more inclusive than this.
You know,
well, there wasn't a teacher, right? There wasn't a teacher
they
or
weren't
administration.
having a tea party, for God's sake.
Well, they were sort of having a tea party, weren't they?
How much good do you think could have been done if you bring a union person into the table? I mean, that's for the second stage of the policy discussion. When you're trying to germinate a good idea and put good policy on the table, you don't have to go and say, well, we need one of these and one of these and one of those. You want people who can contribute good ideas to the discussion.
So,
well, I think,
so in your estimation, the unions can't contribute good ideas to that.
The unions in this state, teachers' unions in this state, have not exactly led on reform. In fact, they've led on blocking reform. And if you're starting the beginning of a brainstorming session,
but I think if
you don't want that sort of poison in the room.
If you dig in on that position, then you're making it an us versus them, and you are not going to change schools in this state.
Well, I think the point is, if you're talking about reforming schools or coming up with some radical ideas, don't you want to talk to the people who are in the trenches every day and that work with
there
the kids?
Absolutely were educators at
Who were
the
the
table.
educators at
There
the
were
table?
there were charter school representatives there, which are, by the way,
Charter
public
school
schools.
representatives,
And,
not teachers.
There were education professionals at that table. I mean, so this was more about how you use innovation, technology, and how you might change the funding formula rather than what you're doing in the classroom.
All fine
And
ideas.
I was just going to say,
and
now
These weren't classroom discussions.
the state superintendent now is going to be part of this discussion. Do you think, though, it maybe took something
Why
like
wasn't
this?
he part of it in the beginning?
Well, but you know what? Now
Well,
he's
that's a
going to be
question
part.
you ought to
Now he's
ask,
going to be part of the group. So when you sit there now,
He had a representative.
Is it good that hang on, is it good that he at least, now the conversation has been started about maybe making some kind of reform?
But Flanagan knew about this. Flanagan had a representative at the table. So to suggest now that there's some radical change in the process is, again, it's just not accurate. He had his guy there. So now instead of his representative being there, he's going to be there himself. But this was not secret to Mike Flanagan. He knew about it.
Bottom line, this is now spurring discussion about maybe what people would term more radical reform.
Yeah, and that's great, right? That is what we need to be talking about in Michigan, is really changing the way that we deal with schools. I would prefer that the focus be more on accountability, standards, things like that, things that you see in the states that are ahead of us in terms of school performance and moving ahead of us. Maryland, Massachusetts, those are the leaders that we ought to be emulating. I think the governor is still in the dark about that and is pursuing an ideological reform, which is fine.
They've got accountability discussions going on.
They do have them going
right
on.
now. They're trying to draft an accountability bill.
And that's very
who's
important.
standing in front of it? Those very union people you wanted.
Well, they're not standing in front of it because there's nothing to stand in front of right now.
They're well along the process of trying to build an accountability measure.
Agreed. One accountability measure that won't put us even in the same league with Maryland or Massachusetts.
Because it's being watered down at every turn by the very people you say should be leading the discussion.
It's just not enough. It's just not enough.
All right, well, let's move on here today. You know, a big decision from Detroit Mayor Dave Bing this week. Okay, maybe not really. He made a big show of picking up petition forms for re-election on Thursday, but then said, well, I'm still deciding. Stephen, let me start with you. Was this a good move on his part to say, look what I'm picking up, but, well, I haven't quite made my decision
I think
yet.
he's sort of caught in a weird position. I mean, he hadn't made up his mind yet about whether he's going to run. I think that's genuinely so. But if you're going to run, you can't decide at the last minute because you gotta get the signatures. So I think he came to the realization that if you're going to keep the options open, you got to go pick up the petitions. But if you go down there, everyone's going to see that you're down there picking up the petitions, and now that becomes a story. So I think he wanted to sort of say, look, I'm trying to decide what this is. This is a fail-safe, right? If I do decide, then I at least can run because I've got the petition.
All right, let me say, hang on, let me say this.
What moves?
No, let's talk about this real quick. So what kind of signal then does that give to the voters, Nolan, that at this date you still really haven't decided if you want to continue this?
The voters aren't voting today. They're voting August and November. And if he's on the ballot, it won't matter if he decided, today or a week from today. I'm just curious, why doesn't he know today? What's he going to know in 2 weeks? He doesn't know now.
Yeah, well, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, he knows the answer to that. But
what would it take for him to think, well, I can do this and I can run it again? And those have to be the questions he's asking himself as he goes out and starts this process now. I mean, I would have thought that by this point he would have already said, hey, I'm not running. We've got a field of candidates. Let those guys go out there. But if he hasn't made up his mind, what's it going to take? He's been in this job 5-6 years. What doesn't he know?
That's what I'm saying. If he's not coming out and saying to the people of Detroit, I am all in again, and he's still kind of waiting to say that, I'm just wondering what kind of signal that sends.
That may send a bad signal to the voters. I think I would look at it, I guess, from the opposite side of the question, which is, would being in this field improve the choices that Detroiters have? I think the answer to that is yes. If you look at the candidates we have, I'm not thrilled about making my choice from among what we've got so far. I think I've been critical of Dave Bing about a lot of things that he hasn't done. I also know there's a long list of accomplishments that he doesn't get enough credit for or that people have forgotten about. I think that adds an important element to the mayoral mix that we will want come July and August.
So the question is, does he have a constituency, and does he have the funding backers? Because you would assume many of the people who backed Dave Bing now got their money behind Mike Duggan.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask. Where does the split happen? So he splits with Mike Duggan as opposed to Benny Napoleon in terms of money?
He can split with all of them. I mean, the question is, can he raise the money to run? And who's he drawing from? Is there a big loyal constituency to Dave Bing? And I don't think he's built that over the 5 or 6 years. I would agree with Steve that he adds to the candidate field. I mean, he's clearly of a different caliber than either Duggan or Napoleon, who, you know, have the taint of previous, you know, I won't say scandals, but they've been around a long time. And, you know, they have sort of each a lot of baggage. So, you know, Dave Bing at least comes in as a person of great integrity. We know that. But does he have a constituency, and does he have funders?
Let's talk about someone who's not running. Ken Cockrell announced this week, city councilman in the city of Detroit, that he will not be seeking re-election. He's been a moderate and interesting voice for the city for a number of years. Did that come as a surprise to you? I mean, maybe there have been rumblings that this was going to be the last term for him, but what kind of, I guess, maybe loss is it that Ken Cockrell is not going to run again?
I think it's a loss. I think we are at a pretty precarious sort of turning point with this council. What's coming 4 years after electing a reform-minded majority and the first election under this new district system. I think stability is the thing that we were trying to ensure, at least for that majority. He's part of that majority, and so now he's not going to be part of it. That's not a good thing for the city. It's also not a good thing for the district that he would have represented if he ran, which is largely Southwest Detroit. That's a district that he has represented, not just on city council, but also on the county commission. So it's a loss, and it's a loss of a political legacy in this city. You know, his father, his stepmother, both were very productive council people as well. It's not a good thing for Detroit that he's not going to run. He did tell me in December that he was not sure whether he had it in him to do it again. I think, you know, he had a lot of different things to think about. One of them, I'm sure, was the rejection that he faced from voters 4 years ago in the mayoral race. I think that's hard. People don't really understand how difficult that is when the voters tell you no to keep at it.
He disappeared for a little while after that. So, you know, he lost his voice on the council. But, you know, I heard a rumor last week he's considering running for clerk, and I don't know if there's anything thing to that or not. But this council is not going to be, I mean, as strong as it was after the last election. I think districts will really change the whole nature of the council and how it operates.
It's going to be interesting seeing as when Kevin Orr does leave in 18 months.